The sitting is resumed. We continue the Standing Finance Committee.
This Honourable House is now in Standing Finance Committee. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I defer until I just got back. So I don't mind deferring, sir.
Thank you, sir. So you have deferred. Well, the record will show that you deferred your position. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Honourable Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. I want to start by thanking the ministry for its obvious hard work across the length and breadth of Barbados. I know the ministry comes in for a lot of flack, in particular in relation to roads, but this needs to be considered against the backdrop of having to rectify natural wear and tear caused by over 10 to 15 years of neglect. So the ministry is now being tasked with doing their own roadworks and also doing roadworks that were neglected under previous administration. So you have to cut them a little bit of slack in certain regards. However, sir, my concern now, my major concern is not roads. I will come back to that later. But my concern is with respect to the PSV sector. It is well known, I've spoken about this a number of times, and I keep hoping for a break in the behavior. But the PSBV sector in Barbados seems to be a law unto itself. I know as a lawyer, people often paint all lawyers with one brush, but in any profession, in any occupation, you have the good apples and you have the bad apples. But I'll tell you, it's not even anecdotally. There's a friend of mine who every single day, it just seems to be his mission, his calling now, every single day, he sends me videos of PSVs, not forwards on. It's like he always finds himself behind a PSV that's doing some nonsense on the road, whether speeding, cutting off, cutting in between, going off route, whatever. He, for some reason, seems to find himself behind these, and it can't be an isolated thing because we also see it ourselves. My major issue with the PSVs, sir, is their refusal to obey the terms of their licenses. We have a situation in Christchurch East, in particular in relation to Ferry Valley, the Ferry Valley area. Thank bottom, where the PSVs that are supposed to run that route from Bridgetown do not complete the route. If I can give you a picture, sir, if you know Pilgrim Road, the gas station at the top of Pilgrim Road, right at the top by the old airport road, the PSVs often let the passengers off up there instead of finishing the route all the way down behind the airport, going across by Ferry Valley and going up by the police training school. So persons from Ferry Valley are left to walk a mile and a half. It happens to children, it happens to old people. Imagine being an old person coming from the supermarket with 2 bags and you get on the PSV that is supposed, the route is supposed to take you past your house, but they put you off a mile, 2 miles away from your destination. It's unconscionable, and it is not a matter for discretion. When you get the license to operate a PSV, it tells you what your route is the roads you're supposed to pass, where you start, where you finish, what roads you're supposed to pass. Everybody knows exactly how they're supposed to drive, but it's not even the persons who get put out of the vehicle unceremoniously with no money back, but also the person who might be waiting on a PSV to go somewhere else. So it throws the whole system into chaos because people refuse to follow the terms of the license. I'm wondering, sir, what is the ministry or what is being done about this? This cry has been made over and over. We're coming into a new financial year. I don't believe it can be that difficult to identify the persons who are operating flagrantly in breach of the law and the terms of their license, and I'm wondering what is going to be done about these persons.
Thank you, Minister. This is an issue that for as long as I have known myself has been an issue, as long as we've had the Transport Authority, certainly almost 16 years, this has been an issue. Previous administrations failed to give the Transport Authority the teeth that were necessary, as I'm sure you are aware. We came to Parliament last year, October, with a view to being able to bring the Transport Authority regulations. The legislation existed, giving certain powers to the Transport Authority, but it simply had no teeth to be able to act on the types of omissions that you have spoken to. Having done that, I think you can appreciate that if for 16 years you have been allowed to do as you like, there is a process now for being able to transition people to doing better and behaving better. People will not automatically, because we've passed regulations, all of a sudden act appropriately. And one of the things that we have had to start to do is to ensure that, one, we communicate with the public, to allow them to understand that these regulations exist, that, as you have said, that persons must complete the route, that is a requirement. But we've also gone further by calling in a number of the owners of the vehicles to alert them to a lot of the allegations made towards these specific vehicles, so that the Transport Authority can commence the necessary investigations to determine the action to be taken. Now, that has been a process in itself. I'm assured by the Director of Transport Authority that there has been some change in the attitudes of some of the drivers. And I will reiterate that if you have information that suggests otherwise, then I would ask that the person who is writing to you on a regular basis share that information with us so that we can deal with it frontally. That's the first thing. As it relates to the training of the drivers, because a lot of this really relates to, again, allowing people to do as they like for so long. And now that we are saying there must be a change in behavior, I think you would appreciate that the one thing that this administration does not do is simply just, say to people, well, we're going to take away your license or we're going to lock you up because you're not complying. So there is still a curve that we are on right now where we are training a number of the drivers and making sure that they understand not just the terms and conditions of the license, but the implications, as you have so outlined, as to the challenges that and the impact on the general public when people do not complete their route. We have had the first 50 persons attending the Barbados Community College, as we said we would do, out of our drivers, to be able to be sensitized in the new regulations, to ensure that they understand what the public is expecting of them. We have also had sensitization sessions with the owners of the PSV vehicles, because we recognize that a lot of the acts that take place on the ground, sometimes the very owners are not even aware of those issues. The issue of mandatory vehicle tracking is something that, again, I'm sure you're aware, we have discussed with the owners. Some vehicles have the mandatory vehicle tracking, others do not, and we intend that will become obviously mandatory in due course, so that persons have to install those tracking devices that would allow the Transport Authority to verify the accuracy of the allegations that are made on any given day towards the drivers of PSVs. But I will stop there, and I will ask the Director of Transport Authority perhaps to give you the day-to-day experience that she's having since the regulations have been passed, and certainly to address the Ferry Valley situation specifically.
Good afternoon, Ruth Holder, Transport Authority. Mr. Chairman, to the minister who posed the question in relation to Fairy Valley, or for those other ministers who may want to pose questions on vehicles not completing the routes. I know the minister was quite adamant that it is not a matter for discretion, but I wish to say that we do know that there's a process of natural justice that needs to be addressed before we actually start to think that we can suspend a license. Transport Authority has disciplinary procedures in place, and it is well known that there is the absolute need to have adequate evidence. You do say, or you did say, that you have someone who goes out and takes videos on a daily basis. Certainly we don't have sight of those videos. When Transport Authority gets copies of any sort of evidence in relation to bad behavior of PSVs, we tend to call in the owners. We ourselves go on the road, and we had a situation with the DPM is well aware, where we took action against a whole set of PSV owners on one evening, but the next morning, DPM was calling the office to find out exactly what had happened and why we took the action we took. We don't take our job as just a matter of fact. We take our job quite seriously. We have some excellent PSV operators out there who are doing what they're supposed to do on a daily basis. But it is difficult for us to identify people if we don't have the information. And as a result of that, you know, it is okay for people to say, well, they're behaving badly on the road. We know that there are some who are not behaving the way they're supposed to behave on the road. But if we do have the evidence, rest assured that we can now take the action. DPM also spoke to the fact that we didn't have any Transport Authority regulations, and I can assure you that since we do have the regulations in place, we are seeing a significant difference. You may not be seeing it, but we are seeing a significant difference in terms of the behaviors on the road and in terms of what we're actually doing on the inside in relation to people who are behaving badly, because now we can quote these various sections of the regulations that will impact upon them and doing the appropriate steps along the way to ensure that we do what we're supposed to do. I do hope that addressed your query.
So, Minister, I hear what was said, and I understand that for things like alleging somebody is off of a route or alleging somebody was speeding or whatnot, you need some form of empirical evidence, and it might be hard unless you're tracking that particular vehicle to verify whether the person was doing the act complained of or not. But that is a stark difference from somebody leaving a bus terminal and not ending up at the end of their destination. So for me, the failure to finish a route is something entirely different and very easy to prove. You need one person at the bus terminal to say this particular license number left the terminal at 11 o'clock and returned to the terminal at 1 o'clock, and then somebody at the other end of the route, we know where they're not going, to say that that vehicle never passed here. That one to me is as simple as you can get. I would not be accused of being unfair to people, and as a politician, you have to be very careful what steps you actually take and getting involved in the process. I mean, I would pay somebody to stamp in the bus terminal, I'd pay somebody to stamp in Fairy Valley, and say how many of the buses that left actually passed the entrance to Fairy Valley. To me, that one is too simple, and the complaints have been too many. This is not the first time, I'm sure that you've heard it. I have spoken about this in here multiple times. The press did a feature on it. People aired their views on it. Every single time I go in there, I get lambasted from larboard to starboard, to quote the Prime Minister, on it. It is not an isolated thing of one or two disgruntled persons. It is an entire community that is being abused by the non-service of the public transportation sector, and they have no other option. This one to me is too simple to verify for it not to be done so. So I ask again, what is there provided for in this financial year that will allow us to arrest this problem? It is such a simple problem, but it is causing such angst and hardship to such a large constituency.
Minister, I appreciate that you want to make sure that the people of Fairy Valley hear you loud and clear articulating in these estimates. But I will also reiterate and confirm what the director has said, which is that basically the attempts have been made since the regulations to bring in the persons who drive as well as the owners on the Ferry Valley route. From our records, there has been some improvement in terms of the persons actually completing the route. If you are asking us to put a person or personnel on every route where there is a complaint, I think you yourself already know the answer to that, because unless we have transport inspectors who are going to stand at the Ferry Valley drop-off point, the last point on that journey, it would be difficult for us to be able to capture whether those persons are indeed completing that route. Even if you say they came back to the terminal, we still don't know whether they completed the route. And I think what we have been able to do is where we have had the evidence of persons noting the vehicle, we have called them in. And as I said, we have seen certain improvements. But I don't know at this stage that there is much more that we can do apart from try to undo the damage that has done from 16 years of not being able to do anything. And the fact that the drivers are actually taking the time, I think, to come to the sessions that we've actually been trying to communicate to the various stakeholders why this is important to make the transition, because what you do impacts on the lives of other people. We see it also from a safety perspective. It's not just about not completing the roads, it's also the nonsense sometimes that we see and the reckless behavior we see on the road, and that is why we took the decision to strengthen the regulations. But if people are accustomed doing the same thing repeatedly, it will take a bit of time before we can actually bring a resolution to it. So I hope that even if it doesn't allay your concerns completely, that it helps you to explain, the direction in which the ministry is taking and Transport Authority to be able to bring some level of order to this sector.
Thank you. I have no more questions related to that initial topic, and I will abide by the rules, as I hope that everybody else who comes behind me will as well.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Michael, South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, unlike the member for St. George South, will not apologize for being parochial with my first question. I am a St. Michael girl. Was born in St. Michael, went to school for what felt like a very long educational career in St. Michael. We go to school long in Barbados. And I feel very strongly, as I would imagine you do, Minister, about urban renewal and the opportunities that we continue to provide to people who live in urban Barbados. Anybody who listens to me or has heard me with any regularity will not be surprised by what I'm about to raise. So far for this morning, we have heard quite a lot of information about the strategy that goes into the prioritization of roads. About whether a road is complex, about whether it requires further works, about whether other agencies may need to come in and do works or have planned works. But I think that there has to be another metric that obtains. We sat in this honorable place and talked for quite some time last week when the head related to the Office of the Attorney General was in the well about issues with how communities care for each other, issues with respect to crime and certain kinds of unrest. These things all relate. You can't say on the one hand that you are giving certain considerations to certain vulnerable communities from the perspective of crime, and then not give similar consideration to those communities from the perspective of infrastructure and investment in people and how people live. But even if you're going beyond that, even if you're not considering that, which I can't see how you wouldn't, there's also the question of not just an urban road versus a rural road, but what we used to, in planning, also consider commercial roads, which is the extent to which a road is highly trafficked because it leads to a commercial center, or because people just tend to use it in order to get to their work or their schools often. I have a very specific question about some of the roads in St. Michael South Central. Not just because people that live in Roberts Gap and the other small roads in Halls Road, people that live in Nurseland, where some time ago an old lady fell because of the state of the road, people that live in Flagstaff, who are interested to understand why is it that they live very, very close to other communities where those roads are being prioritized. The roads in Bridgetown had a lot of activity around the World Cup. The roads in the immediate southern area of St. Michael South Central similarly had a lot of attention. You would understand that a community that has committed to waiting its turn, as it has been asked to do, still cannot understand how a truck can come right up to a border on the south, in the east, in the north, and not consider that a road no more than 100 meters or 120 meters can get a look in. Arguably, and I've defended the decisions to prioritize roads in St. Michael South Central from other members in St. Michael South Central. But arguably, by any metric, the worst roads in urban Barbados seem not to be getting much of that attention. So my question is very specific. Is there a schedule of works with respect to urban Barbados, with respect to St. Michael, that would be able to say to the people of St. Michael South Central when they can expect, not that every road will be done, but it is the strangest thing to see communities come together and say, yes, don't do my road, do that one.
Honourable member, please get to
So
your
is there a
question.
schedule of works that would answer for those people when the roads that have been prioritized and submitted will be done?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I do appreciate the concern, and I believe that earlier I would have stated some of the conditions that we are trying to meet in terms of prioritizing the roads. Not all roads are the same. Some roads on the face of it, I'm not a technical person, I'm a legally trained individual, and I have learned a lot in MTW about roads over the last 2 years, but I can't just look at a road and determine that it is an easy road or that it is a road that ought to be prioritized. I leave that to the technical people to do, and I suggest that all honourable members do the same thing as well. What I think our focus is as MPs, as ministers, is certainly to identify the concerns that have been expressed by our constituents as to roads that we would like to see prioritized for all of the reasons that you have identified. And the truth is that because, as I said earlier, we have 30 seats, I have a responsibility as minister to make sure that there is an apportionment that is fair and that it is just across the board to all 30 members. I cannot handpick because I like somebody or I don't like somebody as to which roads get done. But what we do is we take all factors into account. I ask MPs for their representations as to which roads they would like to see done. We have the depots, which are the entities that obviously should be on the ground and are in a position sometimes to go and assess the roads as a preliminary assessment for us. We also pull from social media, because whether it is Dunksman or whether it is any of the other social media platforms that aggressively go after identifying problems, the ministry has become extremely responsive to concerns expressed. Parish Speaks, as I said, is another forum where concerns have been identified, and the list goes on. We take all of these considerations into account. Even I've gotten to the point now where even though we're doing so many roads, I've found that some newspapers see it fit to obviously speak to the issues, for instance, of the markings at pedestrian crossings. I take that into account and I raise it with my staff so that we can actually seek to address the concerns that are raised by the media as well. So I just want to say that none of the concerns that you've raised or any of the members are off the table. But what we have to still focus on are priorities. And it is correct that during the World Cup cricket, which coincided with the Mill and Pave program, a number of the highly trafficked roads during that period were actually rehabilitated through the Mill and Pave program. We recognize that a number of the other roads in St. Michael that were in equally bad condition also needed some attention. And what we did was we engaged the services of a engineering company to be able to assess those batch of roads that had been on the radar for quite a long time. And that assessment was completed in the last month or so. And you will note, Minister, I believe the roads that are certainly on our radar in your particular area, it would be Roberts Gap, Halls Road, 3rd Avenue, Nurseland, Tweedside Road, Hunts Road, and Carrington Village. The assessment would have determined which roads were easier to be done than others. Some are strict mill and pave. Some, as I said earlier, require more rehabilitation or reconstruction. And while we have started with what I would consider to be the less complex road, the intention is to be able to get to all of these roads that have been highlighted from the various mediums. And so I will not say to you the road is going to be done by X time or Y time, but to give you the assurance that the concerns that you have raised, the roads that may have been mentioned by yourself and others from your constituency have weighed into the determination by this ministry as to how we proceed to prioritize. And it is not for St. Michael alone, I must add, but we have also looked at the roads that, for instance, under the Scotland District project, we're not going to get to every single road. But what we have determined is that parish by parish, there must be 3-4 roads that in every constituency, every community has been on the radar repeatedly. And we are systematically giving priority to those particular roads. So simply because my parliamentary colleague, member for St. Andrew, has had the benefit of the Scotland District project, and those are for major roads. It does not mean that he may not benefit from a side road here and there in the Scotland District, because we've had to give priority to the Scotland District because of the slippage and the topography of the land. But it means that we have had to, in a sense, create a balance where everybody gets a little something. Even the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, depending on which seat he may decide to run for, he will also benefit from the selection of roads. But where we are now, Mr. Chairman, is at a point in governance where we have to be fair, we have to be just, and we have to be equitable in terms of the apportionment of roadworks to be done. Under the Mill and Pave, and I'll just say this last thing, under the last Mill and Pave program, which, as you know, was an easy way to get roads done, they did not require a lot of interventions from the utilities at that point in time. Even in doing the Mill and Pave, we had to prioritize which roads could actually be done under the Mill and Pave program. And I think the key has been priorities. Not everything made it onto the Mill and Pave, and that is why this year we are now on what we call the Focus Roads program, which I said earlier is roads that have been left off repeatedly, and we want to be able to address them. So some will be Mill and Pave, some will require deeper rehabilitation and reconstruction.
It is, I'm confident then, with Roberts Gap having been already assessed to be in terrible condition and also having been being one of the most high traffic roads leading into Bridgetown. The number of people that pass through Roberts Gap from across Barbados to get to Bridgetown would mean, certainly under that criteria, that road would be prioritized. And it is not, I dare say, a question of MPs getting something, but the people of Barbados benefiting from these appropriations that we are discussing. My follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, has to do with, related to roads and to the greater Bridgetown area, but from a different angle, which has to do with the traffic plans and the movement and the people movement plans for the greater Bridgetown area. I have very much enjoyed over the last year or so, like the CEO for the Transport Board who's telling us about how much he enjoys this job. I very much enjoyed being able to work with BIDC Export Barbados over the last year and to share with them the work that they have led on Pelican Island, Pelican Village in Bridgetown. Now, BIDC has done a lot of heavy lifting to try and bring back Bridgetown. And in many ways, they've done it a little bit single-handedly so far because they've anchored Pelican as the beginning of the action for us to bring back Bridgetown. A part of that, I seem to recall, though, a part of that plan related to the pedestrianization of certain parts of Bridgetown and having a general plan for how we would start to bring back life that would begin in Pelican or end in Pelican, depending on your orientation, but then start to drive entertainment and other commercial activity in Bridgetown. Can we hear what is the status of those plans with respect to how we arrange and organize traffic and the movement of people in and around Bridgetown so that we can start to reimagine or imagine how we can complete, with Pelican having started it, how we can complete that revitalization of the city?
Thank you, Minister. I think while in principle we want to build out development around areas that are developing, equally, I think we also have to look at prioritizing works as well based on the urgency sometimes of where those works may need to take place. And so I think while we support in principle the environs of Bridgetown, and there's obviously a project that we've been focusing on for the Broad Street pedestrianization, I think we should err on the side of caution of making it appear as though because Pelican is suddenly booming again, that we are suddenly going to start doing roads in and around that area. However, I will allow Ms. Graham, Lorian Graham, who's the Deputy Chief Technical Officer acting, to perhaps just speak to the plans which she has under the Broad Street project at this time.
My name is Lorian Graham. I'm sitting as Deputy Chief Technical Officer for Design Services. With regard to the Broad Street pedestrianization, what the ministry has been able to do in the past year is, in response to requests from other agencies, we have allowed the experiment of closing Broad Street for use as a commercial and pedestrian space to take place under a variety of circumstances and observe, this is generally on the weekends, observe how traffic was able to negotiate the reduced space, which has given us some information to do forward planning with. The closure of Broad Street on a permanent or semi-permanent basis, we do have in hand conceptual designs for what the space would look like. We have traffic concepts, as you mentioned, Minister Cadell, regarding how we can redirect traffic flow in a more orderly fashion than what we observed. At this time, the ministry is working to, going hand in hand with consultants, build out how these concepts can be tested on a longer term basis to allow, for example, us to try these things on a 3-month or longer period to ensure that they can be made concrete, and also to be sure that the services that the businesses in the city depend on can be organized in such a way that everyone is still adequately served by deliveries, trash collection, that the emergency services are still clear, and that the public transport system can complement the pedestrianized system, because you would understand that even in a widely pedestrianized space, not everyone would be able to navigate the length on foot. So we are still very much in a planning phase, but having done experiments, we are eager to move forward with wider experiments.
Thank you for the effort in providing that response. I should clarify that the plans for, when I was minister responsible for planning, the plans for the proposed pedestrianization of Bridgetown as part of the urban renewal predated the revitalization of Pelican. So Pelican happened to anchor that revitalization in the interim, but it certainly is not a case where we are now attempting to do that because Pelican has stepped in to pick up some of that responsibility. So I look forward to seeing more concrete updates as time goes on. My final but related question really just generally has to do with the Mass Transit Authority. The question of moving people in Barbados is a complex one for an island of our size. We have certain socioeconomic characteristics of the way people like to move that really are interesting. And it means that we have to throw everything at the issue. We have in one part to try and encourage people sometimes to perhaps leave their vehicles, but if they leave in their vehicles, they have to have almost 100% reliability of the transport system. I wanted to hear, Minister, where we are with bringing all these moving parts together in a mass transit authority, just to understand the direction and what Barbadians can expect in terms of improving the general ease of moving around, including the already existing public transport, but not limited to the existing fleet management.
Thank you, Minister. Barbados Mass Transit has been on the cards for a while, and I think in the last few years, we had some challenges in terms of COVID, in terms of meetings. We were finally able to put in place a transition team, which comprises of both representatives from Transport Board and Transport Authority, as well as persons with background in industrial relations and other expertise in public transportation. And the intention is to be able to combine the entities of Transport Board and Transport Authority to bring about a more efficient public transportation system. The good news is that the initial work has been started in terms of looking at how we reorganize both entities, improving the structures as we go along, but also bringing about the route rationalization that is necessary to ensure that both the buses as well as the PSVs are certainly in a position to be able to offer a better means of access for the traveling public as well. The chairman of the committee has indicated to me that we are at the stage now where the business plan is in the process of being completed. We are also in the process of revising some of the regulation, the laws rather, or amending the Road Traffic Act, to creating a new piece of legislation for the mass transit to be able to exist. So we are working on that at the present moment, and we are hopeful that over the course of the next few weeks that the discussions with the unions can actually begin so that they are in a position to speak to their base so that everyone appreciates and understands the transition that is intended to be taking place. The job descriptions, for instance, for the new entities are also completed. A lot of work has gone into it from the human resource team to be able to look at a framework that can be presented to the unions, because quite frankly, no discussion, and we're fortunate on this side for having somebody who represents labor to guide us, but no discussions can take place in relation to any transition under Barbados Mass Transit Authority without first engaging with the unions of this country. And therefore, we are on the verge of being able to start those discussions with a view to then presenting that to the unions and then in turn to the general public. I can ask Mr. Wharton, perhaps, who is doing a lot of work from the transport board's end, which is likely to be most impacted, perhaps to just give an overview from the work that the committee is actually currently doing.
Thank you, DPM. As it relates to the Barbados Mass Transit, in a most general sense, I will say it's going to be a renaissance of the transportation sector, a rebirth of learning. Reverend Morris would be very happy with me to say that, having taught me history at Comamere. That is one thing that stuck with me from history, and I'm not good at history. But what I will say is that we are at the stage now where we have completed a lot of the preliminary work with the transition team. Both myself and the director of the Transport Authority sits on that committee. We have completed, there are some papers which needs to be submitted shortly. Those papers then, there's one in particular which is being reviewed this Thursday, in particular as it relates to the Transport Board. We would then, after completing that process with the transition team, probably within the next week or so, be forwarding the complete plan, the general overview of what we want to do with the transportation sector up to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Transport and Works for review by the DPM, and then our submission to Cabinet for Cabinet to approve. Until we get there, it is just concept at this stage. But that is where we are at the moment, but we are way advanced than when we were here last time, to be honest. So I am very optimistic that, say, by March 15th, March 30th, we should have already gotten into the Cabinet for review and approval or comments and maneuver from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, sir. It probably is not related to the question I intended to ask, but the most recent voice disclosed for the public that Reverend Morris is one of the high-paid consultants in this government. I don't know if he's going to be dealing with flooding, but my question now relates to flooding. I'm looking at the estimates document, and the strategic goals refer to one of the bullet points. It says the strategic goals of the ministry are to provide effective flood alleviation and mitigation solutions across Barbados. And while the minister, the Honourable Minister, wonders where I will be in a few months when the Prime Minister decides to do what the law permits her to do, let me ask then
Please do.
about, beg your pardon, sir?
Please do.
Yes. Let me ask about flood alleviation. And I'm going to name, while I speak from in this office on behalf of the entire country that suffers, permit me to be parochial, though not angry. One did notice the anger that characterized the questions coming from the last minister, but those are internal matters, and I'm no longer party. I don't have to be concerned with those matters anymore. I want to ask the minister about flooding in specific parts of Christchurch. Dover, and I think the minister is well familiar with Dover. I think it's the First Avenue, first and probably the second, opposite, that avenue opposite the large building that used to be in many years ago, the Dover Convention Center. That has been an area of concern for a while. There's the entrance to Fairholme Gardens. It's been problematic for many years. I think the most problematic area would be Goodland Gardens, and I will help the minister with her own document and direct her attention to program 511 of the estimates document. And Goodland Gardens, I'm relieved to note that Goodland Gardens has received special attention within program 511. So we have Dover, that entrance to Fairholme Gardens, Goodland Gardens. I'm going to come to Oystons as well, because the people of Oystons were told that exactly $5 million, not a cent over, not a cent less, that exactly $5 million were spent on Oystons a few months ago. The people who work at Sheffet and the people who live through the street next to Sheffet will tell you that in the aftermath of that exact figure of $5 million having been spent in Oystons, the flooding has become worse in the street, the main street next to Sheffet and the Bay Garden. After the $5 million, exactly $5 million was spent in the Bay Garden, whenever you get a heavy shower, there's still flooding in that Bay Garden. The people are shoveling sand out of their kiosk. So let me go over the areas of concern. Dover, the First Avenue, First and Second Avenue, Fairholme Gardens, the entrance to Fairholme Gardens, flooding for many years. Goodland Gardens, what is the plan there? Oystons, that received exactly $5 million on some red tanks, still flooding there. And Worthing would be very disappointed if I did not mention that those small streets in the area of Crystal Waters, flooding continues to be a problem there as well. So while my 3 minutes is about to expire, Dover, Fairholme, Goodland Gardens, the $5 million project called Oystons, and Worthing. Where are we with those, Minister? I'm obliged to you.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Member. I suspect that you may not have been within the hearing of my voice when I spoke to this earlier in response to a question which touched on not just drainage, but certainly flood mitigation. But I will take the opportunity, since you have raised a number of areas, to just perhaps repeat myself
Yes, thank
for
you.
your benefit.
Yes.
Suffice to say that the ministry recognized that a number of areas across the country were not receiving the attention that they required, similar to roads. And we have since prioritized a number of locations across the country. So you spoke about Goodland Gardens. Goodland Gardens, as I mentioned, was something that was around from the time I think my father was a cabinet minister.
Yes.
We have finally been able, in this financial year, to start the assessments for flood engineering designs to be done. And that is ongoing. We would have met with the company recently to just get an update as to where those are. As soon as those designs are in hand, then we will move to the next stage, which is for them to go to tender. The same consultants are also dealing with Trents and also the wider Dover area. Now, you mentioned specific avenues, but you, like I, who has a certain familiarity with Christchurch South, in which Dover is in, would perhaps also be aware that the area close to when you're coming through St. Lawrence Gap, by the Escape Hotel, or the former Escape Hotel, I think it is, that area often floods, and you often would see tourists as well as locals trying to traverse the water, taking off their shoes to get through the water that has piled up in that area. When we met with the consultants recently, we recognized that that particular area had not been included in the other avenues that were being addressed. And we asked for them to be able to extend the scope of the works to include not just those avenues, as you have mentioned, but also to include the area along St. Lawrence Gap. So I think that addresses those two concerns. The other area you mentioned was Hythe Gardens. Well, I call it Hythe Gardens.
Fairholme.
You say Fairholme. I'm not sure if it is the same location, but the residents of Hythe Gardens would have written to myself and to the drainage unit asking for an intervention. Also, the current representative for the area, who is holding the position for you at this point in time, and we would have visited with the drainage unit that particular area and met with some of the residents, because as I said before, our intention is to be a bit more responsive to these types of concerns when they are raised. And I will ask perhaps Mr. Bryce to maybe just give some more details, since it is in the area that you have represented previously, to just maybe give a little bit more detail in terms of that particular site visit, because would not have been in this financial year, but certainly it is an area that is on our radar for the next financial year to be addressed. You also mentioned the Worthing Crystal Waters area as well. And I know that we do some pumping there from time to time, but I will also ask Mr. Bryce to address those specific areas. Just to reiterate that the first 7 areas that we identified, this is perhaps I think the first occasion in a long time where we have actually pulled these areas out and actually engage the services of engineers to be able to get us to the point where we can actually start to do some work. But what we've recognized in the ministry is that there are lots of other areas. Woodburn, for instance, in St. Philip, is another one that has come onto the radar. The residents have written to us in the ministry. We have even received from the residents in that area recommendations from an engineer as to what could possibly happen both in the short, medium, and the long term. The ministry staff, Mr. Bryce, as the head of drainage, would have reviewed the proposal that was put on the table. And again, in the spirit of being responsive to the residents, we wrote to them and indicated the short, medium, and long-term measures that we agreed with from the recommendations that were made. So I'll ask Mr. Bryce perhaps just to speak to those areas specifically that he would have visited recently that would not be currently within the flood engineering designs.
Thank you very much. You seem to have forgotten the $5 million one, Oystins.
Oh, no, I haven't forgotten. I will come back to that.
Also, you do agree it's $5 million?
I will respond.
Yes,
Sorry?
yes, yeah. No, that's fine, that's fine.
No, but let me respond now. Since you are in that mood now, let me respond to the Oystins area.
No, we can go to your...
Because I will ask Mr. Bryce to speak to it from a technical standpoint, because I'm not here to be political in any way, and for scoring any cheap political points, and you shouldn't be either.
No.
But what I hope that we can do is to educate the general public as it relates to the issues that present the country in relation to climate change,
Yes.
and also some of the infrastructure that is now not able to take the volume of water that perhaps it once used to be able to. To say to you as well, Honourable Member, that I know that you have an angst clearly in relation to money spent in the constituency that you once
No,
represented.
I don't.
But to give you the appreciation that it is not lost on us that the representations continue to be being made on the part of the people of Christchurch South. And wherever those issues are raised in relation to drainage or roads, we will do what we have to do to address them. So Mr. Bryce, if you can address the Oystons, the Hythe Gardens, and perhaps Woodburn and Goodland Gardens as well.
All right, while he's coming on, just let me say, it's a matter of public record that the government told the people of this country that $5 million was spent in Oystons. That is not entertainment. That is a matter of public record that the people in Oystons and Barbados were told that exactly $5 million was spent to remediate Oystons and to fix Oystons. But I'm not asking this minister to confirm that. I'm saying, I'm reflecting the public record, that the public record is that government said it spent $5 million in Oystons.
Mr. Bryce,
I don't want
please.
proof of that.
Mr. Bryce, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me start with you call it Fairholme, but we visited Hythe Gardens, myself and the minister visited Hythe Gardens. I think that was last week. The residents had some concerns about the residents have some concerns of some flooding issues within the area. Currently, we are doing surveys of what the issue is. There are some existing wells in the short term. In the short term, we are going to do some cleaning of the existing wells, but that is not going to be enough to solve the problem. Currently, there's a development on the southeastern side of Oystons, not Oystons, of Hythe Gardens, which is an open lot that the water from Hythe Gardens slowly drains into. That is identified to development. That development has not, to my knowledge, taken the flooding at Hythe Garden. So it's going to be, we have to survey Hythe Garden to alleviate that problem. So currently we are trying to identify how we are going to solve that issue within Hythe Garden. That's the watershed issue. In regards to Oystons, there's not much I can say about Oystons. The drainage unit basically carry out maintenance in Oystons. The development of Oystons, I am not aware of. I can't say much about the development within Oystons. Within Worthing, we have currently did some works in Worthing to alleviate some damage that was done with Hurricane Beryl. That work has been completed. Further investigations have to be carried out within Worthing. So Worthing could be added to the list of flood-prone areas, which would be Worthing, Woodburn, and Scarborough.
Scarborough in Christchurch South, correct?
Yeah, in Oystons.
Yes, good.
Oh, finished? Oh, good. I don't ask, I don't impose on the public servants. I just ask the ministers. So I don't question public servants directly in here. I feel they should be in here giving advice to the ministers. So that we hear that work was done in Scarborough, and that maybe that is the area where the landowners, where there are efforts being made to force the landowner off his own land for tourism development in Oistins. This has to come to light at some point. I don't care who grumbles. We heard about Worthing, we heard about Oistins. The answer is that not much can be said. This is what I wrote, not much can be said about Oistins. I accept that after the $5 million. Now, along that stretch that is earmarked for paving, what a relief. When a previous minister occupied the office that our minister here occupies today, we were told that the South Coast Road, Highway 7, could not be done. In fact, the work had to be delayed because subsoil work had to be carried out. That is, the public utilities had to be attended to before any work was done. And the goodly minister then, and I do say goodly minister then, had told me that the work would begin at Bay Street and come up to, I think, Harmony Hall. That was then shortened to the junction at Worthing, which reached the edge of that goodly minister's constituency. And then something called the Mill and Pave program came along, and work was done along that stretch. Some partial work was done along that stretch. And there has been no excavation to attend to public utilities. My simple question, Minister, are we now hearing that the full stretch of Highway 7 will be done without any excavation that attains to utilities subsurface? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Most welcome.
No, I'm not sure where you got that from, but allow me to perhaps seek to just clarify for
Yes,
yourself and perhaps any utterances that may be made similar to that any further from this chamber. Highway 7 has been on the cards for a little while. As you said, there were previous ministers who would have announced that we would have been doing some work on it. But as with most things, when you have limited capacity in the ministries, it is difficult sometimes to do a lot of the preparatory work that is required, and in particular, making sure that you have all of the coordinations with the utilities, that the designs are done for those works. Certainly in the last 2 years, what we realized was that there was a deterioration of the road along Highway 7. We were able to place it within the Mill and Pave program as a temporary measure, and we always made that clear. We coordinated with some of the utilities then to be able to ensure that there was as little disruption as possible. But at the same time, a parallel track was being run, which is that we were in the process, even before the Mill and Pave started, of engaging a consultant engineer to be able to work on the Highway 7 project. And by working on it, I refer to being able to coordinate with the utilities to make sure that all of the diagrams, all of the plans of where utilities are along Highway 7, which would stretch from Independence Arch all the way to what is referred to as the Highway U junction, that we would be in a position to know exactly how to plan the major upgrades that would have to be made to that road. Where we are presently, and I would have mentioned it in my opening, in that under the CAF roads, there is provision for Highway 7 to commence in this financial year, is that we are currently undergoing the social surveys, the assessments of who will be impacted, how they will be impacted. As you know, there are a lot of businesses along that corridor. And we also are mindful that there are lots of residences along that corridor as well that will be impacted. What we have looked at is being able to also identify the number of guard walls, boundary walls that exist, that if we are to do any movement in terms of the utilities by placing them further into the side of the road, that we would be in a position to know precisely what the cost implications are for this type of major upgrade to be done on the South Coast. Obviously, the South Coast has been treated badly in previous years on the previous administration when it came to the South Coast Sewage Project. So in addition to water mains, we also have to be mindful of the work that has to be done in relation to the sewage system along that coast, as well as the utilities by way of the Barbados Light and Power as well. And just to say to you, Honourable Member, that, you know, trying to do a project like this is a mammoth undertaking in terms of the coordination that has to happen. What the engineers have done is, and the ministry has divided the road into, the designs rather, into 4 sectors. The first being Independence Arch to Garrison Road, which is about 2,300 meters in length. Then you have Garrison Road to Rendezvous Road, which is 3,300 meters in length. Rendezvous Road to Graham Hall Road, which is another 1,600 in length. And then finally Graham Hall Road to Highway U Junction, which is 3,300 meters in length. So our intention is to complete works along all 4 phases. I believe the stretch that we have started to look at first has been the highway, the sectors 1 and 2, which is the Independence Arch to the Garrison, and then from Garrison Road to Rendezvous Road, with a view to being able to start the preparatory work that is necessary once all of the designs are in and the construction drawings and all of the utilities have been able to weigh in on the project, to be able to commence those works. But for the most part, we are on track in terms of where we want to be in terms of the preparatory work.
Thank you very much. And let me also thank you for not interpreting this exercise as hostile engagement. This is for the benefit of the public. I'm so grateful. And we'll follow up now, finally, Your Honor, by reminding the Honourable Minister that she has described the mill and pave as a temporary measure.
No, sorry, Minister. Sorry, Member. I indicated that the temporary works that were done on Highway 7 were it was mill and pave, which was a temporary fix because of the condition of the road at the time. And there are times when sometimes you, even though you know that you have something coming up in a works program, you may have to do the quick fixes to be able to alleviate the condition of that particular road. Highway 7 is a major artery. It is a highly trafficked route, and we felt it best to be able to put the resources behind ensuring that the access along that road could be completed, because we did not want a situation where it continued to deteriorate as other administrations have done in their works plan. And then we find ourselves playing catch up or spending even more money to do the rehabilitation. So we have taken the time to do the preparatory work to make sure that when we start, that with all of the social surveys behind us and all of the works that are being done now in terms of our boundaries, that we are in a position to be sure-footed as to when we actually start the works on that road.
Yes, so lacking in hostility is this engagement that we're saying the same thing. And let us repeat the same thing. I was leading to a question, so we've agreed that the mill and pave project along Highway 7 is and I'm quoting you, a temporary measure. In other words, the government is spending some millions of dollars to pave. Presumably you want to make the persons who travel that route, well-traveled route too, happy in the interim. You may not choose my language, but I have the right to choose my language. So that this, to quote you, Minister, the mill and pave, which is presently expending millions of dollars along Highway 7 is a temporary measure. To that, I am adding that in the interim, it will make persons who travel Highway 7 happy. Except, however, and this is the question, except, however, is it intended at some point after this temporary measure to excavate that highway and to do the more substantial work? That's the question. After this temporary measure, which expends millions of taxpayers' dollars and makes people happy, is it the intention of the government to excavate and do the subsoil work in preparation for the more substantial work of repaving Highway 7? Thank you very much.
Yeah, just so that you are clear.
Yes, please.
Because I would not want the belief going out there that we are just digging up a road and putting down a temporary surface to then dig it back up again, as though we have no sense of direction as to what we're doing. To say to you that under normal circumstances, there would have been more deep milling done on that road.
There would have been more what?
Deep milling, as in
Oh,
that
deep.
they
Yes,
would have
yes,
gone
yes.
deeper, which would
Yes.
have obviously impacted the actual costs.
Yes.
In this particular situation, we did not do that because we recognized that we had the preparatory work ongoing in relation to Highway 7 for more major reconstruction. So when I speak of temporary, it is in the context of the type of work that was done, but
Yes.
to say to you, it isn't that we are wasting funds. Primarily, we had to do something because pothole patching would not have sufficed. I think we had exhausted the amount of pothole patching that could be done on that road, and it would have ended up being far more expensive to be able to patch the road than it would be to have done the milling and paving at the depth that we would have been able to do.
Thank you very much, Minister. And Your Honor, I know that you will allow me to reserve my right to come back after you've had your lunch. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the Speaker that progress has been made and ask leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker. I beg for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Stand here.
Has reported progress and sought leave to sit again.
Speaker, I beg from this House, do stand suspended for lunch until 3 o'clock.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until 3 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 3 p.m.